Okay, in this video we're going to do review problems from the three sections 2.1, 2.2, 2.3 dealing with solving linear equations and word problems. And also there will be some problems dealing with percents. Okay, our first problem, solve the equation x plus 1/5 equals 1/6. Okay, we do this by subtracting 1/5 from both sides, and that gives us our solution. So why don't you do that and get your answer and come back. So when we subtract 1/5 from both sides, we're left with just x on the left, which is what we want. Then we have to do the subtraction. Our least common denominator here is 30. 6 and 5 do not share any common factors, so it's the product. 6 times 5, 30. So we rewrite the fractions in terms of 30ths. 5/30 minus 6/30, and that adds up to negative 1/30. Okay, in our next problem, we solve the equation 1/3 equals 10x. Now the 10 next to the x means 10 is multiplied by x. To get rid of that 10, we have to do the inverse operation, or the opposite operation of multiplying is division. So we have to divide both sides by 10. So when we do that, the 10's on the right side, the 10 over 10, they cancel each other, leaving just x. Then we have to take 1/3 and divide by 10. So that's 1/3 times the reciprocal, 1/10. And we get 1 times 1, 1 over 3 times 10, 30. Okay, and on the right here, I'm showing a better way to do this problem. Besides, other than just dividing both sides by 10, we could have multiplied both sides by 1/10. Because that's what dividing by 10 is. It's multiplying by the reciprocal. And when we do that, the 10's cancel out on the right side, leaving just x. And we have our answer, 1 times 1 over 10 times 3. X is 1/30. So we get our answer in one step rather than two. And it seems a little easier than to follow than this dividing by 10 business. So remember that you can cancel out a factor by multiplying by its reciprocal. Okay, in our next problem, we have the equation negative 10x equals 0. Now we can solve this by dividing both sides by 10, or by negative 10 rather, or multiply both sides by negative 1/10. Either way, we get x equals 0 divided by negative 10, which is 0. Now, the thing to remember in this type of problem is anything times 0 equals 0. So when we have negative 10 times some number equals 0, that number has to be 0. So if you remember that, you can solve this just by going right to the solution, x equals 0, remembering this property. That's actually the 0 multiplication property. Okay, in our next problem, we're going to solve negative 1/3 equals x minus 1/2. And to get rid of that minus 1/2, because we want to get x by itself, we do the inverse operation of subtracting 1/2, which is adding 1/2. So add 1/2 to both sides and then solve for x. So that's what I did here. I added 1/2 to both sides. Now notice I wrote the negative 1/3 as negative 1/3. I put that minus sign into the numerator. Now to add those two fractions, we have to have a common denominator. In this case, the lowest common denominator is 6. So we multiply the negative 1/3 by 2/2, multiply the 1/2 by 3/3. We get negative 2/6 plus 3/6. And that adds up to positive 1/6. Okay, now we're going to look at some of the percent applications. Using that percent times amount equals, or percent times base equals amount relationship, we start with the problem 110% of 2. What is it? So our percent equation is percent times base equal amount, where the percent is given as a decimal. And we use x for our unknown part of this equation. In this case, our amount is unknown. We're taking 110% of 2. We change 110% into the decimal, 1.10 times 2. And when we multiply that on a calculator or by hand, we get 2.2 equals x, and that's our answer. Okay, in our next problem, the question is 2% of what number is 40? Okay, we change the 2% into the decimal, so it's 0.02 is equals, 40 is our amount. So what's unknown here is our base, which we let equal x. So we get the equation 0.02x equals 40. Well, we solve this by dividing both sides by the 0.02. And either by hand or with a calculator, 40 divided by 0.02 is 2,000. So x is 2,000. Okay, here's a problem for you to try. 160% of what number is 100? So use this percent equation like we just did on the previous problem and see if you can solve for that number, which we're going to let be equal, again, x, our unknown. So set up the equation and solve it and find out what that number is. So our percent equation here is 1.6 times x, our unknown, equals 100. Remember, you always have to turn the percent into a decimal. And we solve this equation. We can simplify it to 1.6x equals 100. Divide both sides by 1.6, and you get x equals 62.5. And you should check for reasonableness. 160% is more than 100%. So a bit more than 62.5 is 100. That seems reasonable. Okay, in our next problem, what percent of 75 is 30? Now in this case, our unknown here is the percent. So we have x percent of 75, that's our base. So x times 75 equals an amount of 30. So that's our equation, which we would write 75x equals 30. Now keep in mind, x is the percent given as a decimal. So we're going to solve for x, divide both sides by 75, and then turn that into a percent. So we divide both sides by 75. We get x equals 30 divided by 75, which is 0.40, but that's not our answer. That's the decimal form of the answer. We want the percent. Move that decimal point 2 places, so it's 40% is our answer. Okay, and the last percent problem we're going to look at is the out of problem. Now, you can use the percent equation for this, but it's a little confusing as what is the base and what is the amount. We know what the percent would be, x, but it's kind of confusing which is which here. So for this out of type of problem, out of means divide. It's like 1 out of 2 is 1/2. 1 out of 3 is 1/3. 25 out of 400 is the fraction 25/400. We just turn that into a decimal by dividing it out. And when we divide 25 by 400, just use a calculator, we get 0.0625. Well, that's not our percent, that's the decimal. We just turn that into a percent by moving the decimal point 2 places. Remember the rule of 2 places. Move that decimal point 2 places. The percent is the bigger number, so we move it to the right 2 places. So it's 6.25%. That's the way I would recommend for these out of problems. Divide out the numbers, turn it into a percent. Okay, we're going to look at some 2.2 problems where you have multiple steps to solve the equation. So here we have the equation 1/3 times x minus 5 equals -4. Now the first thing you're going to have to do here is add 5 to both sides. Then you'll get rid of that 1/3. What you're doing here is you're doing the order of operations in reverse order. Like if we were to put in a number for x, we would multiply, then subtract. Well, to undo those operations, we first add to get rid of the subtract, and then divide by the 1/3 to get rid of the 1/3. So add 5 to both sides, divide both sides by 1/3. Okay, and when we add 5 to both sides, our equation becomes 1/3 x equals 1. We can divide both sides by 1/3, which means we invert the 1/3 and multiply. 1/1 times 3/1 is 3/1, which is 3. And remember, you could have also multiplied both sides here by 3/1, which would accomplish the same thing. X equals 3. So either way, you get the answer x equals 3. If you plug it back in to check, 1/3 times 3 minus 5 is 1 minus 5, which is -4. So it checks out. Okay, in our next problem, we have to solve an equation by using the distributive property first. So we have to first multiply out both sides. So we distribute out and we get 4x minus 4 equals 5x plus 10. Now we just have to get the x's on one side and the numbers on the opposite side. And there's 2 different ways you can do this, but the easiest way here is subtract 4x on both sides. And when we do that and simplify, we get -4 equals 1x, or just x, plus 10. And then we just have to subtract 10 on both sides, and we get -14 equals x. Okay, in our next equation, we have 5 minus 3 times x plus 1, the quantity x plus 1, equals -2. Now, keep in mind, we're not multiplying 5 minus 3, the quantity 2 times x plus 1. Only the -3 is multiplied by x plus 1. And what you can think of this is 5 plus a -3 times x plus 1. So you distribute out the -3, combine like terms, and then solve this. So when we distribute out, we get 5 plus a -3 times x, -3x, plus a -3 times 1, -3. Combining like terms, we get 5 plus -3 is 2, plus a -3x, or minus a 3x, equals -2. Now we just subtract 2 from both sides and then solve for x by dividing both sides. So when we subtract 2 from both sides, we're left with a -3x on the left equals -4. Divide both sides by -3, and we get x equal -4 divided by -3, which simplifies to just positive 4/3, because remember, 2 negatives divided results in a positive result. Okay, and this next problem, and this seems to be a little confusing for people, where you have fractions in the equation. 1/3 x plus 1/5 x equals 10. How do we handle those fractions? Well, first off, I would recommend rewriting this as x over 3 plus x over 5 equals 10. Now, to add these fractions together, we need common denominators. In this case, 15 is our least common denominator. So when we multiply the first fraction by 5 over 5 and the second fraction by 3 over 3, we get 5x over 15 plus 3x over 15 equals 10. Well, now we can combine those numerators. 5x plus 3x adds up to 8x over 15 equals 10. So we combine fractions together to get the 8x over 15. Now there's a one-step way to solve this equation at this point. You could multiply both sides by 15 and divide by 8, but better yet, multiply both sides by 15/8. So 15/8 times the 8/5, they cancel. We turn the 10 into 10 over 1 times 15/8. So we get, whatever that is, 120x over 120. All those numbers on the left cancel, leaving just x equals 150/8, or 18.75 if you want the decimal answer here. Either answer is fine, or you could even write it as a mixed number. Although in algebra we usually don't use too many mixed numbers. Usually we use the improper fractions or the decimals if we want the decimal answer. Okay, in our next problem, we have 9 times quantity x minus 2 minus 3 times quantity x plus 4 equals 2. Your first step is going to be to distribute here, but you have to watch out. This minus 3, it's actually a negative 3 you're distributing out. So this is actually what you're doing here. You have 9 times the first quantity plus negative 3 times the second quantity. So now you distribute and go from there. So we have 9 times x, 9x, 9 times negative 2, negative 18. Negative 3 times x, negative 3x, negative 3 times 4 is negative 12. So now adding like terms, the 9x and negative 3x makes 6x. Negative 18 plus negative 12 is a negative 30, or we can just write minus 30. Now we just have to get the x's alone and the numbers on the opposite side and divide and solve. So add 30 to both sides and then divide by 6. So see if you can finish this off and get the fraction answer. So we add 30 to both sides, 6x equal 32, divide both sides by 6, and we get x equal 32/6, which we could also reduce down to 16/3. And I think I have enough room here, 16/3. Okay, on to some of the word problems. Twice a number is increased by 4, and the result is 11. What is the number? Well, you'd start off by letting x equal the number. And then we go through our statement here and replace the words with symbols to create an equation. Twice a number is 2 times our number x is increased by 4 would mean we're adding 4. Sometimes is means equals, but it doesn't here in this context. But then we get to and the result is, that second is means equals. So we get the equation 2x plus 4 equals 11. And then to find the number, we solve the equation. So to solve the equation, subtract 4 from both sides, 2x equals 7. Divide both sides by 2. X equals 7/2 or 3.5. So if you double 3.5, you get 7. Add 4, you get 11. It checks out. In this next problem, twice the sum of a number and 10 is 30. What is the number? Our number is going to be x. And twice the sum of means 2 times the sum of x and 10. We need parentheses around that sum. And then we have the word is, which equates to equals 30. So there's our equation. 2 times x plus 10 equals 30, where the x plus 10 is in parentheses. So now we just have to solve that equation. So we subtract 20 from both sides. We get 2x equals 10. So then x is 5, dividing both sides by 2. Or just looking at it, 2 times what number is 10? X is 5. And it checks out. 5 plus 10 is 15. 2 times that sum is 30. Okay, in this next problem, we have two numbers that add up to 30. One number is 4 times bigger than the other number. What are the two numbers? Now, there's several ways to do this. One easy way to do this problem is to let x be the other number, and that means the one number, the first number, is going to be 4x. So we have a number that's 4x because it's 4 times bigger than the other. Added to x is going to add up to 30. So you get the equation 4x plus x equals 30. So that's the simple way of doing this problem. So we just add 4x plus x to make 5x equals 30. 5x divided by 5 equals 30 divided by 5. We get x equals 6. And you're tempted to say, I'm done, but the question is, what are the two numbers? Well, if 6 is the one number, the other number, the first number, which is 4 times as much, is going to be 4 times 6, 24. So our two answers here are 6 and 24. Those are the numbers, and indeed they do add up to 30, and 24 is 6 times 4, or 4 times as much. Okay, here's a problem using the word difference of. Now, difference of means subtract. The difference of 3 times a number and 2 is 19. So if we let x equal the number, our equation here is 3x minus 2 equals 19. So that's our equation. And it's a pretty easy equation to solve. Add 2 to both sides. 3x equals 21. Divide both sides by 3. X equals 21/3, which is 7. And we can check that out. 3 times 7, 21, minus 2 is 19. Okay, and one last problem. Let's see if you can do this one. Set it up, solve for the number. The sum of twice a number and 4 is equal to 3 added to 3 times the number. What is the number? And of course we let x equal our number, and figure out the equation for this if you can. So here we have the sum of twice the number and 4. It's not twice the sum of the number, which would have parentheses. It's the sum of twice the number. So no parentheses here. 2x plus 4 means equals, in this case, 3 added to 3 times the number, which would be 3 plus 3x. So our equation here is 2x plus 4 equals 3 plus 3x. So now try to solve this equation. Get all the x's on one side, the numbers on the other. So to solve this equation, we subtract 2 x's on both sides, leaving 4 on the left side equals 3 plus 1x, or just x. Then subtract 3 on both sides. X equals 1. Okay, that's it for these 3 sections. Kind of a long video here, but they all kind of go together. So we'll see you next time.